Welcome to another episode of Cyrus's podcast. Today we have Randi, Brandt. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. We are in Chicago. We're right on a freaking lake.
Beautiful.
Or what is this, a river?
The river.
Sorry,
It's close.
not a lake.
It's okay.
It's big.
It's not an ocean, we'll put it that way.
Exactly.
Welcome to the Midwest.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm really excited about this because like I know your background in like real estate space as an investor, like just in general, like all of these things. And so I'm really excited to kind of get more into you and your story versus just like how I know you, you know?
Absolutely.
So I want to first get into like, what did you do before real estate?
So I got into real estate in my 30s, actually. So I had an entire career before this.
Oh, snap.
I went to Michigan State for hospitality business.
Okay.
I got a job right out of college and sent me to Colorado, and I worked for Vail Resorts, and I was their event coordinator for 3 of their different ski resorts over 10 years.
Oh, wow.
So I got to travel the west side of the country for almost 10 years before I realized that it was not for me. Corporate America was not my jam.
And what was your like day-to-day in like that job? Like what were you responsible for?
So I oversaw the actual events themselves. So in Keystone, we had a conference center where I could hold up to 1,500 plated dinners and all types of conventions. And so I would make sure every day each room was set up the way it was. The crews were there, the food and beverage was there. I worked directly with the kitchen department.
Wow.
And then also security, because there were many times where we would have high military officers on site. So we would have to have security in there. So I was all the day-to-day operations manager.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. So then you're doing that. What the heck? Why did you get into real estate?
So in the 2009 crash happened. I was able to keep my job. In 2012, they ended up, Vail Resorts cut line level management. So because I didn't have a master's degree, I got the boot.
Wow.
Yep. So I worked for a nonprofit for about a year and a half just to try and figure out what I wanted to do.
What was the nonprofit?
So it's Project Sanctuary. It's based out of Colorado. They're military family retreats. So they do 6-day therapeutic recreation retreats for the entire family, because we've had over 2 decades of war.
Yeah.
And some families just don't know how to cope with it. So we try to help with that. And I still am part of that.
That's really cool. Okay, so you worked for the nonprofit, and then because you didn't know exactly what you were going to do, and then so
So then my sister got married. She started having babies. My grandfather got sick, so it was time to come home. So I came back to Detroit. And I ended up having the opportunity to, just through word of mouth, I started an event planning company myself.
Okay.
I focused on some corporate events, mostly though weddings.
Yeah.
And we have a very large Indian population in Michigan, and my mom used to work for a few Indian doctors, so I grew up in the culture.
Yeah.
And I became, before I sold my business, I was the top recruited wedding designer for Hindu and Sikh ceremonies.
Wow.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I went to India with a client to help them pick out fabrics once.
That's pretty cool.
Yes. So in 2015, I realized that as much as I loved the industry, it wasn't going to be a longevity for me. I wasn't going to be able to retire and have the life I wanted.
Yeah.
So I started looking at real estate as an investor of this is how I was going to be able to retire in my 40s was my goal. So in the beginning of 16, somebody actually approached me to buy my book of business in the wedding industry, which I wasn't prepared for. I sold it, and in December of 16, I got my license and became a full-time realtor.
Wow. Okay, so I didn't even know you did that. So you actually sold your previous company that you had built.
Yep.
And then got into real estate. And you got into real estate because of the fact that you want to be an investor, or because...
The goal originally was I wanted to be an investor. Yeah. I had already been in sales for so long. I figured why not also, because I was bored.
Yeah.
I have to go back to work. I have to work and do something every day. So I became a full realtor, full time.
That's amazing. Okay, and so then talk to me about like that first year transitioning from like all of this stuff that you have been doing before into real estate. Like what did that look like?
It was very similar, honestly. You have to prospect, you have to go out, get your name out there as a beginning, business owner. You're a nobody. Nobody knows who you are. So I networked with everybody I could. I used my old book of business and profited off of that. And I have a lot of my old wedding clients
Yeah,
buying
of
houses.
course.
So they were some of my test dummies, honestly. And thankfully I had a good enough relationship. I was transparent. They knew I was just new in the business, and they were good with me kind of failing forward and getting them through into their first homes.
That's really cool.
It was great. And then I was able to work with an investor. Funny story. I met him sitting at a bar, actually. I was there with some girlfriends. I thought he was hitting on me. He sold or bought 5 houses with me 3 weeks later.
Wow.
So my first year in the business, I actually sold 39 units in downtown Detroit, and all of them were $35,000 or less.
Wow.
I grinded my first year.
$35,000 or less.
That is a 3-bed, 1-bath brick ranch or colonial in my
What?
market.
That's crazy. So, okay, so you're just closing, because how many units do you typically close a year?
I still average about 40, just
Yeah,
different.
you have to be,
Yeah.
different price points and things like
Right.
that, right? Yeah. But that's still so impressive. So how do you, and then do you have a team, or do you?
I'm a
is it
solo
also-
agent.
Okay, so like talk to me about that. Like talk to me about like how you're a solo agent closing this many amount of units. Like how is that possible?
It's all about time management. It really isn't hard. Like I'm still, even when I travel or I'm on vacation, there's still time slots of my day that are still allocated to business prospecting, whatever facet. In the beginning of my career, it was everybody's least desired cold calling. I would do that for 2.5 hours, 6 days a week, religiously.
Yep.
And you
I love
had
that.
to, because one, you get used to being told no. Now, try and tell me no. I dare
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
I will overcome that every chance. And then, so now it's more of my follow-ups, my marketing on social media, because that's a lot of where
Yeah.
my business comes from. And then just making sure I've got the time to allocate for whatever clients I have that day. A lot of my clients are not in Michigan, and they're in different time zones. So I actually adjust my schedules based on their time zones. So I might have a really nice break in the middle of the day, and then I might work like 7 or 8 o'clock at night because
Oh, wow.
they're in a different time zone.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. And you had mentioned, you had said you did cold calling for, you said 2.5 hours a day, 6 days a week. And I think the important factor that you had said in there, like, that's where you learn how to take a no, but really it was an educational piece for you versus really a prospecting piece, it sounded like.
Absolutely. Oh,
Yeah.
it was, so many people would get so nervous to pick up the phone, and I think they still do.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned it into a game. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? Somebody's going to hang up on you.
Yeah.
I would literally call that person back and be like, I'm so sorry, we must have got disconnected.
Yeah.
What I was saying was, and 50% of the time, I would lock in that appointment.
I love that. And also, like I always tell people, you can't lose a lead you don't have.
Exactly.
Like, so people are so scared to like prospect or follow up or do all this stuff, but it's like you don't have the client. Like as it is, you don't have the client. So you cannot lose that client.
Yeah.
So go try it.
0% of nothing is nothing.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So it's like, try it. Just keep trying it, because at the end of the day, it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
Right? So okay, so you did that. You've absolutely crushed it in real estate. Like
Well.
you've done extremely well. I think that you do really well on the investment side of things, because that's what we talk about all the time, right?
Yep.
And how did you, like, I know you said initially you wanted to get into real estate because of investing, but were you investing before you got into real estate?
No.
Okay, so how did you go from like agent to like investor owner?
So I did, realistically, I probably did everything ass backwards. I bought my first investment property before I bought my first home.
Okay.
So when I was working with my investors in Detroit for the single families back then, I would only have, a small amount of money to be able to put in. So I would put $5,000 into a deal with my clients, and I'd get $8,000 back when we
Yeah.
bought it, until I was able to buy my first investment. And so I've only been piggybacking that, and now that we're doing multifamilies, I do the same thing still.
Wow.
So I've grown it to where now when I do my multifamily deals, I do more of a percentage of, so, with things that change, there's always opportunity where I can become a 10% equity shareholder, and then my clients can either buy me out after a year for that amount of money, or I can continue on and stay as an owner.
Okay.
And so now I've got partial ownership in almost 80 doors, and I own 12 myself.
So okay. Let's break this down, because this is like free game right now, because I think this is so smart. What you do is you find a deal, XYZ deal, 25 unit deal, let's pretend.
Yep.
You take that deal and you say, hey, investor, here's the deal. I'm not gonna take any commission from it, I'm not gonna take anything from it. It's an off-market deal or whatever, I'm guessing, right?
Yes, most of them are.
And then you basically say, in exchange for that, I want this much equity.
I've yet to be told no.
Where did you come up with that idea?
So I have to admit, I did not come up with that myself. I learned that from somebody else.
Okay.
I learned that actually from Brandt Tanner.
Okay.
And he's a big one within my brokerage, and he taught me. One of his people actually mentioned doing something similar to that. I kind of just created it into my own. So,
wow.
Learn from those around.
So you went and you basically reached out to your network, and or tell me how that, like, so do you talk to him all the time about it, or like how did that like work, or did you reach out to him and ask him for advice?
I had the opportunity to have a small mastermind with him.
Okay.
There was about 30 of us, so we had some one-on-one time for 2 days, and I kept wanting to get into the bigger multifamilies. I've done a couple 4 units, but I really wanted to get into the 20 plus, because there's such a big market in my area right now for it, because so many investors bought them, and now their hard money loans are coming due and they can't pay them. So now, because I've built a name for myself, they're calling me saying, can you sell them? Well, absolutely, I can sell them. Why not also capitalize on them and build my portfolio that I wanted? So I kind of sat down with him and said, what am I missing on this? Because I didn't want to put the money down myself.
Yeah.
I'm still very frugal in things because I don't come from a lot.
Yeah.
At one point, you know, the money that I made off of selling my business, that I've never touched.
Yeah.
I've pretended it's never there. I keep a very small amount of money in my day-to-day checking so that I always have that grind of I have to keep hustling and work hard.
Yeah.
So he kind of brought this to me of, you know, if you offer lesser percent of commission, because a lot of times on these deals, your client is who pays you. So if you're on the buy side of it, your buyer's still paying you on it. It's all a negotiation in my market. So rather than them paying me out of pocket, they're giving me equity in the shareholder of it, of the building, keeping money in their pocket so we can put more money into the building if we need to.
Yeah.
And then in a year or so, we can have a conversation. I can either stay on and make more money over time, or they can buy me out for an agreed upon price.
Okay, so I love like this because of like literally 10 different reasons. The first reason is like that you, and I'm breaking it down because I think it's so important and we can't skip over this. Like, you went and you had zero ego to go and say, how the heck do I do this?
Absolutely.
Which is like, again, I see this in every freaking successful person that I interview. Every single time, like, it's the same conversation. I knew somebody that was doing it really well, and I said, how do you do it? And so you went and did that. So you got that. And then now you've built this thing. You're basically taking equity, and then you become a shareholder essentially, right? You have a property that, let's say, pretend you own 10% of. If you have to put 100,000 in, you're paying 10% of that.
Correct.
100,000 to because you own part of that property.
Exactly.
And then on the backside, if you want to sell it afterwards, you have an agreed amount that you can sell it. Yeah. So you have an out as well.
Yeah. So it's a mutual agreed upon. It's the contract that we place before we even go under contract on it. Is there is a set price amount based on what it will be. So the other caveat is that I don't own a property management company. It's never something I wanted to get into.
Yeah.
I do have a client of mine who runs a very successful one in Detroit, because Detroit is a very different market, I'm learning, than most other areas. Like, we literally knock on doors and say, hey, your rent is due. It's just how things have been.
Yeah.
And so I do offer them, they'll take on these buildings, and usually it's between 4 and 6 months, we'll have it fully occupied at market value, because a lot of these buildings are not being rented out at market value. I also work with the VA and Section 8 housing.
Yes.
Love them. I don't care what anybody says. They are the greatest to work with. They also give me the top dollar.
Tell me, why are they the greatest to work with?
It is literally guaranteed money. If I ever have an issue with one of my tenants, I call their social worker or their caseworker and say, hey, I need some help with this. They'll handle it. I don't have to worry about it. My property management doesn't have to worry about it. So it's so much less of a headache. During COVID, when nobody was getting their rent money, we were making all of our money.
Yeah, I love that.
My tenants weren't worried about being able to pay their bills or not because they got government assistance.
Yep.
We were all good. We had some help with the utility companies because that is not included. But everything else was 100% good to go. They were,
taking care of.
Okay, yeah. It was great.
And you also, it's the same thing with VA, right? Section 8 and VA, it's the same kind of setup?
Exactly.
Is that what I'm, okay.
Yeah, the VA, the difference with VA is they generally want an agreement for the entire building because they like to have all of their vets in one space. It's just easier for their caseworkers.
Yeah.
So generally when I go under a contract, I will reach out to my VA contacts and say, hey, I have a 64 unit that I'm going to be taking on. Are you interested in it? And if so, what can you get it for me? So we had one in Lansing. It was 64 units, and they ended up, for the 1-bedroom units, they gave me $900 a month, and they write the lease agreement to us for the entire building for the year, and then they tell us who the names are. So it's with the VA themselves, not the individual.
So your agreement is actually with the VA.
Correct.
And then they basically say, hey, look, these are the people that are living here.
Yep, exactly. So, if a vet has an issue and they have to go back into the hospital or something, we're still getting paid. They will ask to place another one, and that's fine because I don't have a break and I'm not having such a turnover because that costs money, obviously, on the bottom line.
Wow. Okay. So interesting. So you've gotten to this. You've scaled very quickly because, like, in my opinion, I'm thinking, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you've scaled very quickly because you've gone into each space with I say no ego, right? And pure gratitude in the fact that you're here to be able to do this. And then you went and you asked the people that you knew needed help. So you went and did that, and then you were able to scale quickly because of that. Is that?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, it's how do I learn from those who are doing what I thought I never could, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, one of my biggest clients, he's become a good friend of mine. He's 8 years my junior, and he owns hundreds of doors throughout the country.
Yeah.
And honestly, he's given, he'll bring me deals and say, this is how we're going to do it. I'm going to help you. He was the first one that said, I need you to invest with me.
I love that.
And, you're genuine with people, they take care of you. And you try to give that back. And so it's really just boosted. And I do try to treat all of my clients well. And that's how I got so big into the multifamily. It was never something I looked for.
Yeah.
My name gets thrown around so much, though, as the go-to in the Detroit area because I can get deals done. I also have the network now behind me where I don't need to throw it on the market. I can do it within my database or people that I know who I know also buy into this.
Yeah, that's really cool. So now, let me ask you this. If you had to give advice for one person that maybe they're in their 20s, their late 20s, and they're thinking about, hey, I want to do a career switch or something like that, what advice would you give them if they want to be in your shoes one day?
This is a business. The moment you decide you're going to get into real estate, if you do not set it up as a business, you've already failed. That is the biggest thing we see is that realtors come in, they think, oh, it's great, I can make my own schedule. That is a lie until you actually get your business up and running. I'm going to make all this money, which is true. You do make, we're very fortunate in how hard we work. It is lucrative for us.
Yeah.
But when you don't treat it like a business and you don't want to put money back into it, you're going to fail it. And that's 100%. Where you don't have the sustainability. And that's why so many of these realtors are out of the business. And even investors, they do the same mistake. They don't treat it like a business. They're just at that quick bottom line, and in 3 years, they're not even on my radar anymore because they've failed.
So if you want a successful business, treat it as a business, build a business plan, and build a budget, and run your freaking P&Ls.
Absolutely. I look at my P&Ls weekly, I mean, I have my group, like, so my CPA, my financial advisor, we look at them annually, quarterly, monthly, and then I'm looking at them weekly because things always change. Things
100%.
pop up. And I've got multiples. I've got them for all of my investments. I've got them for my own actual business. And I've got them for my personal life.
Yes.
Because you have to.
Yes, 100%.
I also like
love that.
spreadsheets, so
Yeah.
it works.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Now, if people want to connect with you, where do they find you? How do they find you? How do they connect with you?
Social media. You will always see me. So it's plain and simple, Randi Brandt, IG, Facebook. I'm old school with that.
Can you spell it out for me?
Yes. Randi, R-A-N-D-I. I am a girl. Brandt, B as in boy, R-A-N, D as in dog, T as in town.
Thank you so much for being on. I appreciate you. All right.
So great.